Stop me if you've heard this one before. A father was killed, leaving behind a son who loved and revered him. Someone who had to now lead in his footsteps. T'Challa, Prince of Wakanda, is now king, left to bury his father and carry on traditions throughout his lands. And yet, he still feels so empty. Fueled by not only the responsibility of his people, but the responsibility of the mantle he now carries. Now let's talk a little bit about Captain America. Catch up with what he's been on since the first movie. Well, he hasn't really been handling his transition into his new life very well. Steve has pretty much done nothing but be Captain America since the end of the first movie. He's still haunted by his old ghosts, Kiser, or simply just the people he's lost in his time away. You see, at the end of the first movie, you think he's been able to move on. He's been able to accept the fact that he's here now in the present. His whole character arc in the first movie was about learning to live in the present. And yet it's just undone in this movie. Mainly because he can't let go of Kiser, the man he wants to kill. It's even causing turmoil with the person he's closest to, Natasha.
You cannot fill your life with this. It will kill you.
Then let it.
And on the other side of that coin, the man who was running out of time, well, he's locked in a cell. He's sedated almost 24 hours a day to prevent him from having another Hulk outburst. He's forced to sit there every single day and watch what he did over and over and over again. His own personal hell. But you see, Captain America isn't the only person trying to fill a void that Kiser left. T'Challa comes looking for him, knowing that Captain America has history with Kiser, seeking his help to help avenge his father.
My father was killed 4 days ago by this man.
Kiser.
Not only was Kiser still alive, but the Chitauri were still kicking it around Earth, kind of making everything Hulk did in the last movie irrelevant. Banner threw his life away for nothing. But this motivates Fury. He decides he wants to deploy the Avengers once again, to hopefully help deal with this before it becomes any worse than it was last time. So let's catch up with the other Avengers and see how they're doing. Janet and Hank are having their usual domestic disputes, but thankfully they keep their hands off of each other. Tony is out climbing Mount Everest with his board of directors for whatever reason. And Thor, well, I think it's best if you see what he's up to. With Thor preoccupied by seeing the death of his teammates and friends, the rest of the Avengers are deployed to Africa to go to Wakanda and basically just help T'Challa in finding the Chitauri. But T'Challa only wants the help of Captain America because T'Challa has one thing on his mind, just like the Captain, and that's killing Kiser, because nothing else matters to him at this time. Meanwhile, the Avengers are playing Get to Know the Natives with the Wakandans, and it's going about as well as you could imagine.
Or not. Well, that's embarrassing.
So after the Avengers got to know the locals, Black Panther came back with Captain America, and let's just say he wasn't none too pleased, so he kicked everybody out of his country. But you see, that didn't come anywhere near close to stopping Captain America from not only disobeying direct orders from Nick Fury, but actively going out and recklessly getting himself into more danger by hunting down Chitauri. You see, Steve finds T'Challa interrogating one of the Chitauri, and is quick to bring him back to the ship so that they can discuss their findings further. But maybe next time Steve should take more of an open-eyed approach to what's going on around him.
Bringing it on board, you put all of us at risk.
She is right, you know.
So, surprise, surprise, the easy Chitauri that Steve was able to find, it was a trap, set by Kiser so he could lure Steve out and hopefully kill the Avengers. And it was nearly successful too. I mean, look at them, they're all about to die and make Thor's premonition come true. Until he decides that's not good enough for him. And while the Avengers were out dealing with their own problems and healing their wounded, the Chitauri decided, we're doing our full-scale invasion now. And they started to launch every single Chitauri they had all over the globe, starting with Wakanda. So the Avengers do what they do best. They assemble and kind of just get their asses kicked because they're completely overwhelmed in this movie. I mean, there are Chitauri everywhere. It's almost like a Hydra. Cut one head off, another will take its place. Always. But you see, not every Avenger was on this mission to Wakanda, as Wasp was still hurting in the infirmary, and Hulk is still locked up. Except the Chitauri came for him. They really want this guy dead. By the time Betty had made it to Bruce, it was too late. He was already dying. But he did give them one last good piece of information. The gamma radiation that was in his cells was what made the vibranium so brittle. He told Betty to get the device to the Avengers to hopefully save the day. In his last efforts, Bruce chose to be a hero. But back in Wakanda, Captain America and T'Challa, instead of focusing on fighting the war with all the Chitauri, they chose to focus just on Kiser. Because all they have on their minds is revenge. When Betty and Wasp finally show up in Wakanda to help the Avengers, they need to find a way inside of the big Chitauri ship. And of course, the only two people that can fly are Thor and Iron Man. And since Thor needs to distract the big laser they're shooting at the ground, somebody else has to go with them. And the only person who could go is Giant Man, if he decides to shrink back down, knowing full well it'll tear him apart from the inside out. But he wants to prove something to Janet, that he's far more than some arrogant asshat. Finally, Captain America and Black Panther are making their last stand against Kiser, hoping to drown him in a vat of vibranium to seal him away forever so he can never come back. Now stop me if you've heard this one before. A father, a man beloved by his son, was killed in cold blood by another man, taken from that son, leading him down a path of vengeance and hatred, leading him to want nothing more than to kill the man who took his father away from him.
And all this death, just so I could kill you.
Now you tell me, who does this sound like exactly?
Vengeance has consumed you. I'm done letting it consume me.
Because to me, it seems as though they're two wildly different people. One willing to let go of his vengeance, and the other who can't seem to escape it. With Kiser finally dealt with, we cut back to looking at Iron Man and Giant Man. Giant Man decides that he needs to hold off the Chitauri, while Iron Man uses his gamma-irradiated backpack to basically blow up their core. But Giant Man might have bit off a little more than he could chew. As they make their descent, Hank loses consciousness because of the explosion. And by the time Janet gets to see him, he only has a few words left.
See? I told you I could be the man you always wanted me to be.
You are, Hank. You are.
Hank had spent a majority of the last movie and this one just being a douchebag, not only to his wife, but to everybody else. But when it finally counted, he made right. The day one and the Chitauri finally gone for good this time. There are a few loose ends to tie up, and one big-ass party to have in celebration.
On several occasions, did you not hear of my victory over the fire demon Surtur? They speak of it still in the halls of Valhalla.
With all their enemies vanquished.